Alrighty, everyone, this is meteorologist Timmy Albertson here with you guys for tonight's weather chat. Now, with that in mind, it's somewhat quiet out there compared to what we've seen the past couple of days. We don't really have much in the way of strong thunderstorm activity, nor really much going on, at least immediately in the tropics. We do still have Hurricane Nigel that is out there. We'll take a little quick look at that in just a moment. But before we go any further, one thing I do want to remind you guys is that the location of where these videos are being posted will be changing as we go to October 2nd. So let's take a look here quickly over at the screen. For those of you who are subscribed to the AWSC channel that has this little thunderstorm logo up here, or not logo, but banner image there, you're eventually going to actually want to move over to the other AWSC page, which has this snow banner up here. That's where eventually these weather chats are going to be posted and posted to only. So if you're wondering what that address is, all you have to do is type in awsc.live into your browser, and it'll take you to the one with the snowfall map at the top. And that is the page that you're going to want to subscribe to. Beginning October 2nd, that's where all these weather chats are going to be posted and posted only. Alrighty, everyone, let's go ahead and take a look over at Hurricane Nigel that is out in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, Nigel is not really anywhere kind of close to land, and as we go through the next couple of days, it's just going to kind of continue to gradually weaken. It's actually going to be running into some cooler water temperatures. In fact, it kind of already is starting to get there a little bit, and it's also going to be entering into an area with a lot of wind shear. And if you remember me talking about, we talked a lot about this with Hurricane Lee. Wind shear is not good for a tropical system. It really disrupts it. So even though hurricanes tend to be pretty strong pretty strong storms, they're actually somewhat kind of fragile out there. So a little interesting nonetheless. But Nigel is just going to kind of continue to track to the north and to the east. It's actually there's an area of high pressure just off to its south and to the east. So that's kind of helping Nigel, or direct Nigel, to the north and to the east. So with that in mind, that high pressure is down to the south and to the east. So it's located toward the right of it. So that's what's helping to give Nigel that northeasterly course. Eventually, it's going to run into another area of low pressure that'll be up across the far North Atlantic, and eventually it'll just get absorbed into that, becoming non-tropical and basically kind of, tapering itself out. So with that in mind, Nigel not really going to be affecting land any bit here. So there is still some convection going on with Nigel. Again, it is a Category 1 hurricane with winds of about 90 miles an hour. So again, just below the criteria for a Category 2 hurricane. And remember, we talk about tropical systems. They're rated based on their wind speeds only. And again, a lot of times even the maximum winds are only found in kind of a small area generally. Though, as we did see with Lee, as he was moving into parts of New England and the Canadian Maritimes, if those hurricanes do begin to weaken, sometimes their wind fields do expand. And, we can start seeing it's kind of a wide range, more or less, of some of those stronger winds. But in this case, that's not so much the case for Nigel. Now, as it will weaken, its wind field will begin to expand a little bit. But again, it's going to be pretty far away from land, not really going to be affecting any places on land. But if you're a boat or some fish, it might be a little bit of a problem later on. But all things considered, going to be staying away from land. So what else is going on in the world of the weather right now? Well, again, as I mentioned, things are a little bit on the quiet side, and I use that term kind of lightly, because if we take a look at the latest weather map, basically what we got going on here, if you take a look here, is that we have this large area of high pressure that is off the East Coast. So again, kind of keeping them quiet more or less. And then if we go over towards the parts of the Southwest, there's also another area of high pressure that has been working to keep this area a little bit quiet. Now, yesterday, we were watching some strong storms that were down across parts of Oklahoma and Texas. Those have since kind of tapered off. Part of the reason why we saw those was this little bit of an upper level disturbance that was pushing its way through and kind of getting a little bit of help from a little bit of moisture that was also within that. So that's kind of helped fire up some of those storms yesterday, produce some decent sized hail, as we saw over in Oklahoma City, all the way down to Frederick. When we were tracking them, they were down around the Frederick, Oklahoma area. But later on in the evening, they did kind of produce at least some hail across the Oklahoma City metro. Nothing unusual for them down there. But if you take a little bit of a look here, a little further up, I'm kind of covering it a little bit here, but if you take a look at this map here, you see kind of this long, kind of quasi-stationary cold front that is located across parts of the upper part of the plains and back into the central part of the mountain region across Yellowstone, going back into Nevada. So what's actually kind of interesting right now is what's happening is that things are a little bit quiet again, courtesy of that high pressure over the East Coast and that high pressure down across the southwest there of the U.S. But if we were to actually flip over to an upper level chart here, I'm kind of covering it here, so I'll just see if I can't move myself briefly over here so you guys are able to see it. We actually have this basically this upper level low that is beginning to dig itself in to the Pacific Northwest. Now we can actually see that a little bit on the radar, and we'll take a look at that here in just a moment. You can kind of see a little bit of the swirl, but basically this is a closed off low. So the rest of the jet stream and everything is actually farther up towards the north, not on this particular map here. So this is what we call a cutoff low pressure or cutoff upper level low. We'll come back to that again. That'll play kind of a big role sometimes in the winter time too. But long story short, just kind of think of this as where some of the active weather is. So we have this closed off low that's just kind of sitting there across the Pacific Northwest. And as we move our way through the next couple of days, you can see how that low is just going to kind of slowly kind of meander its way across Idaho and then eventually into places like Wyoming. But again, it'll be kind of weakening a little bit as it does so. So over the next couple of days, what we're going to be seeing is some scattered shower and thunderstorm activity up across the the Northwest Pacific area and going back into places like Montana. But here's where it can also get a little bit interesting is that as this upper level low begins to make its way into the plains, it could actually allow there to be a development of maybe some strong thunderstorms in places like South Dakota or Nebraska. So we might be watching that as we go into Friday evening or possibly into the day on Saturday. Again, timing's still a little uncertain, but could be, maybe some more hail type of thunderstorms like what we saw down in Oklahoma and Texas last night. So it'll certainly be interesting to watch. Nonetheless, you can see that upper level low just kind of continues to weaken up a little bit as it tracks its way across the Dakotas and then eventually back over into parts of Minnesota. So what does that mean on the weather map? Well, basically, when we take a look here at the weather map is what's eventually going to be happening, and I'll go ahead and move myself again over to the corner that we're all generally pretty used to me being in. This kind of whole frontal boundary here, more or less, is going to begin to eventually start tracking its way gradually a little bit towards the east. But again, it's not going to be the quickest moving. So over the next few days, we're more or less going to see this kind of whole frontal boundary just kind of sticking around this area. And again, we'll be seeing some of those scattered showers and thunderstorms kind of moving along that frontal boundary. So again, not necessarily the most active weather, but still pretty interesting nonetheless. And like I say, folks, when we get into wintertime, when we're dealing with, stronger low pressures and stuff like that, we'll go into a lot of explanation about the whole upper level low and all that stuff that I keep showing you guys. It'll be pretty cool, but it's a lot easier to actually explain when we actually have some of those stronger systems going on so we can kind of take a look at it real time rather than me just putting up, some general diagrams that, may or may not help to illustrate the point. So don't worry, folks, for those of you who like learning a little bit about weather, we will be learning a little bit about weather, especially once we go maybe starting, in October, and once we get into November, and of course, obviously through the winter, we'll go through the whole cyclone, development and self-sustaining process, and then eventual taper off here. It's actually very fascinating, and it's one of the things I love to talk about. Is the life cycle of a low pressure, and there's a lot of things that are really cool about it that I think you guys will find pretty interesting too. But in the meantime, we don't really have too many examples of that right now, save for this little low pressure that is tracking its way through parts of Western Ontario, trying to drag a little bit of a cold front through. But again, that front is probably going to taper down a little bit, even slow down. Again, remember, we're kind of waiting for that upper level low across the Pacific Northwest to eventually move its way through Montana and Wyoming and then into the Dakotas. And that's where we're going to be generally seeing some of the active weather over the next couple of days. Let's take a look here at the radar. And again, mainly just dealing kind of with some scattered showers and some thunderstorms. So since nothing's really happening across the East Coast, I'll just go ahead and cover that part up for right now, because again, a lot of the activity that we're seeing is Pacific Northwest and then back out along that frontal boundary. So you can see some showers and thunderstorms down across the Idaho Falls area. As a matter of fact, they actually got one thunderstorm that is at least severe thunderstorm warned right now, and that's probably going to be for about 1-inch size hail and maybe some locally gusty winds in there. But I mentioned earlier, you can kind of see that upper level low a little bit on the radar imagery. And if we were to actually go ahead and extend the frame right out here, you'll notice, if you look very carefully as we loop this here, notice kind of the rotation, more or less the general kind of rotation here of some of these rain showers while the radar imagery is loading here pretty quickly. There we go. So you can kind of see a little bit here how these showers are moving down to the south. These ones over here are kind of moving up towards the north. So again, that's kind of that swirl from that upper level low. Those showers are kind of more or less following that swirl there. So kind of cool that you can get that you could see that there on the radar. Of course, sometimes, most of the time, you could generally kind of see some type of feature like that when you're dealing with these closed lows, so upper level lows. So again, at the surface, the nearest low we have is this little guy right here. So again, it's kind of underneath that closed low. So more or less over the next couple of days, we're just going to be watching as that upper level low just kind of gradually works its way over towards the east. And again, that could maybe help to produce some strong thunderstorms across North Dakota, or excuse me, South Dakota and parts of Nebraska, maybe as we go into Friday evening. So that'll certainly be interesting to watch. In the meantime, all the other activity is really just kind of along that frontal boundary, more or less just kind of hanging out. Again, things very, very quiet if we go over towards the East Coast, not really seeing anything happening over there, at least in terms of precipitation. Again, they're just dealing more or less with that kind of broad area of high pressure that is sitting over there. A little disturbance tracking its way across the Mississippi River Valley, but again, all things considered, generally pretty quiet over there. So now you know kind of the game plan over the next couple of days. We're going to be keeping an eye on these showers and thunderstorms out across, the northern part of the U.S., around Montana, Idaho, and into Wyoming, and then eventually into the Dakotas. And again, there is going to be that possibility for some strong thunderstorms, maybe in Nebraska and South Dakota, as we go into the day on Friday or perhaps Friday night, and maybe going into Saturday. Again, we'll just kind of have to keep a little bit of an eye on that. Could be pretty interesting, though. So that's kind of a quick explanation of what's going on. Again, overall, it's generally pretty quiet out there in the U.S., so I guess that's pretty much most of what there is to talk about without going into scientific detail about everything else that's going on in the weather. But overall, you get the idea. There is another tropical disturbance that is going to be coming off the west coast of Africa here. And that one, again, could be one that will be interesting to track. And I do expect that will likely probably become our next named system, maybe by the end of the week or possibly over the weekend. Again, it's working its way off the West African coast. And then again, it is expected to kind of at least track its way down here. You're wondering what this track is, by the way. That's Nigel's track. So again, didn't have necessarily quite the excitement that Hurricane Lee had, but that's still nonetheless. Both Nigel and Lee are actually Cape Verde hurricanes. And if you heard me talk before, it's the Cape Verde Islands off the coast of Africa. West Africa, we tend to actually see these systems, working their way off the West African coast. They travel eastwards and they travel westwards. And because they're over very warm waters and they have a lot of space to work with, those tend to be the strong hurricanes that we end up seeing in the Atlantic Ocean most of the time. Now, again, there are some exceptions. Sometimes we get strong hurricanes developing in other places. But, historically, if you wanted one group that always kind of tends to produce some strong and long-lived hurricanes, it's the Cape Verde ones that come off the coast of Africa because they have so much room to work with, not like the ones that pop up in the Gulf of Mexico and quickly run into land. So pretty interesting, though, nonetheless. So we'll keep an eye on the West African coastline as we head our way through the next couple of days. So all things considered, that's kind of a quick look at what's going on right now. Again, we'll keep an eye on everything else that's going on. For those of you, again, who don't remember, again, where these weather chats are being posted is to a Facebook page or to a YouTube page, but we're going to be moving that location. So for those of you who want to know the address of the new YouTube page, you're going to want to subscribe and follow or like. It's going to be awsc.live. That's the one you want to go to. Just put it in your browser. It'll take you to the right one. If you put AWSC into your browser and you see the page that you haven't liked, well, that means that you need to like this one eventually. Yes, October 2nd, because beginning October 2nd, weather chats will be posted solely to this page. All right. All right, everyone. Well, I thank you all very much for taking the time to join me here. I know it's kind of a quick one, but hopefully tomorrow's might be a little bit longer. And I think we might have some interesting stuff to talk about as we take a look into Friday across parts of the Dakotas and maybe into Nebraska. At least we'll have maybe some more strong thunderstorms there to keep an eye on. So with that in mind, everyone, hope you all have a good rest of your evening. Take care, everyone.